future is now.
Broadcasting from the Queen City, breaking down business, leadership, community, and family. Here's your host, the president and CEO of the Northern Cincinnati Foundation, Aaron Satzker.
The future is now.
I am here today in Northern Kentucky, and as I look around from Megacorp Pavilion, I see a crane right out the window, and that just goes to show that we are in an awesome, vibrant area. And I am here with two movers and shakers from Northern Kentucky, Nancy Grayson with Horizon Funds in Northern Kentucky, as well as Lee Crume from BE NKY. Welcome to both of you awesome CEOs in the Northern Kentucky community.
Thank you. Welcome to the southern side of the greater Cincinnati region.
I'm excited to be here. It seems like, just looking around here, I want you guys to fill me in on all of the positive things that are happening, because I'm looking out the window and I can see a crane right now. And that means, right, there's positive economic development and so many things happening.
I don't know if we have that kind of time. All the positive things is a
This
lot.
is good.
There's a lot of momentum.
Positive. We're
This is good.
Sitting in the middle of Ovation, which is incredibly exciting development.
So cool.
And you think about our metropolitan area here, it will literally change the skyline of downtown Cincinnati. And seeing it come out of the ground is just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, it really is.
It's probably going to be one of the hallmarks of our skyline on our side of the river. I've seen the vision that Bill Butler and Corporex have painted. It's pretty incredible. We're thrilled that it's going to be generating a lot more activity on the riverfront. This is kind of an entertainment area now. I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things beyond just the lovely concerts that we've been having. I actually got to sing on stage with Suits That Rock at Ovation
No
here.
way.
So
Oh,
maybe I'll sing you some songs later in the end of the podcast, but
We're ready for this.
I don't think it's long enough for everything. But I think I view the river really as Main Street USA. That, yes, there are, as an attorney, I know there are very different laws that may govern each side of the river because of state laws, different jurisdictions. Certainly we have a good number of those in Northern Kentucky too, 36, 37, depending on who you're talking to, cities in a 3-county footprint in Metro Northern Kentucky. But the assets that we have for the region, and you see this with the promotion of the region outside of Ohio and Northern Kentucky, how are we working together? And it's really this larger footprint of kind of what we can bring to bear when a company's looking to locate here. If a family's coming here, they want to look at what they have to access. And I think for both sides, you can park on one side of the river and have a great meal. And then, like I do, we walk over to the Bengals game or the Reds game and just enjoy a game and spend time over there. And it's really more fluid. It's more porous.
Yes.
But it's a rising tide so that all ships are able to succeed. And that's something that I think our group of growth organizations that we're really passionate about, making sure that we want Northern Kentucky to win, but we want the region to win as well.
Yes, and I think that that's the way to really go about it and to look at it.
There's a lot of growth happening.
It honestly, as I look out from Ovation to the river, I see just, it's such a cool picture, really. And it feels vibrant and electric just to be here. And I'm like, where else can we go? Where else should we go? And so I'm hearing about Covington and that you two are going to be working from the same building. So I want to start there and dive into other areas, but tell me what led to this project happening in Covington where all of these major leaders are going to be in that same location. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very easy 40-year story to tell. It started with truly going back nearly 40 years with a vision for how do we work better and drive growth and economic development in Northern Kentucky. Part of that was the genesis of the organization I worked for in the late 80s. It was how do we do economic development better? And the idea was let's get organizations like Nancy's, like mine, the Chamber, the Catalytic Fund, Meet NKY. There's several others that are going to be in the building. How do we get all of us in the same space where we have this really great location to entertain clients, show off the community, brainstorm, share energy. It took really 40 years to get that developed, but that's the why behind why we're trying to do this building. And so we're sitting here, just a half a mile from where that location is. And it's, again, you talk about crane watch, it's really cool to see that building is coming out of the ground. You can start to see the concrete moving up from the street level. And it's really, really happening after, again, just 40 short years.
Yeah, I thought I was like 5, but 40 sounds much more impressive.
Yeah, these things are complicated especially when you're dealing with quasi-governmental entities, nonprofit organizations, just the challenges of developing economic. You just think about trends of where companies want to be. There's a real economic wind blowing towards inner cities today. People want to be in inner cities. That has really helped the project along. It took a lot of effort to get everything. Not a small part of it as well as the growth of the life science industry in Northern Kentucky. You think about companies like Bexion here in Campbell County, PPD Labs, Ethos, Gravity, CTI, of course. That growth of that life science industry allowed us to work with the state to create a life science incubator, wet laboratory, which is going to be one entire floor of the building. That building doesn't get done without that investment from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So again, it took 40 years to get all those Lego pieces lined up to get the cool building that we're going to have.
Right. I mean, really thinking about everything that I've seen happen in the past, I would say, 10 years? Really, it's been so positive. And post-COVID, I feel like you guys have been so much more active. Is that true from a leadership perspective, Nancy? Have you seen Northern Kentucky really pulling together all of the community builders to, keep the momentum going?
There's something magic that's happening right now, magical, I think, among all of the leader groups, among those who are running the different organizations. We enjoy working with one another. We collaborate often, and that's been the case for years, but I think we're doing it in a much more visible way, whether it's here, we're showing up together even in Frankfurt. We're really aligning how we're working with public dollars and infrastructure, with private dollars, with philanthropic dollars. So where do each of us and each of our organizations fit in? During the pandemic, we had a relief fund. We raised $2.1 million, helped 85,000 Northern Kentuckians who are in need. It was incredible. A lot of our nonprofits partnered with us. But we even worked with Lee and his team and also the chamber on providing some restaurant relief for those who had smaller restaurants that they were going. We all love to have I'm a foodie, a good meal out.
I think of Covington when I think of that.
It's just become this kind of destination, I would say, for people around the region, even friends who come in from out of town love being in the more urban environment. But how do we work together, help those local restaurants? At the time, we were all ordering out and trying to find ways to support them. And this was just one small, but I think meaningful way that we rallied as a community together to help some of those local businesses. And that's really what most of our community is made up of, are these very small kind of homegrown businesses that over time have grown. But it's really the backbone of why we are doing what we're doing today.
Nancy, it's funny you mentioned restaurant relief. And I haven't thought about this, that COVID broke 4 years ago, and in the middle of that, we did that restaurant relief program. And you think about what's special about Northern Kentucky. I remember restaurants giving the money back, saying, "No, we're doing fine. Give this money to a restaurant that's not doing fine." And that happened multiple times. It was an absolute gift that they could have taken and accepted and just moved on, but instead they said, "We're okay. Find somebody else to help with it." And I think that really speaks to part of the spirit that was in place in Northern Kentucky.
So let's talk about you two as leaders. I was reading back on, you, Nancy, as well as you, Lee. And so I want to ask you both. Nancy, talk about how you got your start.
And I love this question because I had a very non-traditional pathway to where I am right now. I'm actually an attorney. A lot of people don't recognize that. I think mainly because if they know me because my husband, who is a recovering politician, we were very visible when we first met, and he became Secretary of State, and we raised our daughters. But I served on a lot of statewide commissions and boards. I joke that I worked in leadership positions, but for free. And so I did it with my time and my talent. Hopefully they saw it as a talent that I was adding to these different groups, and eventually was invited to work with Vision 2015, which was our visioning organization, which through many iterations is now the One NKY Alliance. That has a long history as well, but really trying to set data and metrics around growth, positive growth in Northern Kentucky, and they hired me to work on some education initiatives. That's my passion is education, women and children in particular, but education being, in my opinion, one of the best ways to help people thrive. And so did a lot with companies, with actually with Lee's predecessor, with the CEOs, with United Way, with nonprofits, foundations, schools, of course, and had this lovely tapestry of experiences there that really, I think, laddered up to preparing me to apply for this job in 2017 when our new community foundation was formed. So it allowed me the connections, but also to see things from all these different cultures. We all have our own way of speaking and engaging, and what a business person might expect might look a little different than somebody who's experiencing teaching preschool children, and
Absolutely.
versus
Definitely.
somebody who is helping to provide food for folks who are food insecure. So really trying to figure out as a region how we stay nimble with our Young Community Foundation. But I've loved it. It's been a blast building something from the ground up with a really powerful group. I would argue I have one of the best boards in the region. It was scary at times, but really probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
I think you probably learned too through that experience, right? Starting something from the ground up, the why behind why you have the business practices that you do, or the policies that you do, or the think outside the box to grow when you're starting something maybe later than, when the first one was birthed in the early 1900s for community foundations.
They
So it
look
is a
different.
challenge to grow.
Yes.
Typically in this climate right now. And so you're doing a fabulous job. I have to commend you.
Well, thank you as a sister in philanthropy.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
a high compliment.
Absolutely. And then Lee, let's talk about your background. Looks like you worked for a lot of very impressive companies.
If I were to answer that in the shortest way possible, you think about the young kids at home who are watching this, how do you get your dream job? It's a little bit of intentionality and a lot of just sheer luck. I started my career, I graduated from, I like to say, the Western Kentucky University.
Hilltopper.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
Yes.
my whole family was in education, going back generations. I knew I didn't want to be in education, but I knew coming out of that environment, I loved to lead and work with people and teams, and I loved to find opportunities to teach. And I needed to find an environment to do that. I was very fortunate. I started my career with a little company called UPS, which teaches you a lot of really good lessons like work ethic and having a plan and the value of really good measurement of what you're doing. And then honestly, there was a lot of dumb luck for 25 years as I pursued my career. I was very happily at work one day and I got a call from a recruiter that Jobs Ohio, which is an economic development company for the state of Ohio, needed somebody with my background. And quite honestly, didn't really have an idea what Jobs Ohio did, but I knew a lot of people in Ohio were suing each other over the creation of it, and I thought, well, that'll be interesting. Let's go find out what that's about.
Right.
And it just turned out to be a perfect fit for my skills at that time, and so I was really fortunate to be early in at Jobs Ohio and make an impact in economic development. And then you flash forward 5 years later, a great colleague of mine, Jonna Reeder-Claymeyer, had left Ready Cincinnati and was going to NKU to be the interim dean at the business school. And I was talking to Jonna one day and she said, why didn't you apply for that job at Northern Kentucky Triad? And I said, Jonna, I honestly never thought about it. And she said, I think you'd be perfect.
Yeah.
And so I literally screen scraped my LinkedIn profile and sent it over. I had an interview a couple days later and it was almost like a match made in heaven.
Lucky us.
Yeah, no,
that's super
I honestly very lucky me, and it gave me the opportunity to really a culmination of everything I have been doing from being in college through college, all my professional career to get to do that here. So,
and you're like here at a right time, right? So when did you start? How long?
It's been almost 5 years.
Okay.
I started in April of 2019.
Wow,
Yep.
That's pretty amazing. And I look at the momentum that Northern Kentucky has right now. And we were talking before this episode about the Port Authority getting a restart, right? And you have Christine Russell at the helm. Love Christine, so shout out to Christine.
She's awesome, tiny but powerful.
She is. She's amazing. And I have to say that to Christine because my mom speaks very highly of her. So Christine worked with my mother at the Cincinnati Port Authority, and my mom ran the Cincinnati Port Authority for 10 years. And so she thinks the world of her. So kudos.
Yep.
I love that she's on the team, and really you guys are all working together so well.
So Nancy and I had a little bit of Nancy got to start a company in 2017, which is challenging. I had the opposite. I came in 2019 for a company that had been around for more than 30 years that was going through a restart. We had to we had to kind of rebuild a company and shape what its vision was going to be for the future. So really interesting kind of different arcs in getting here. And Christine
But
and a
still
couple
synergy.
Yeah.
It seems like you have so much synergy.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier about Nancy was talking about at the very beginning, the collaboration in Northern Kentucky. And I can tell you, when I interviewed for this role, and I can remember sitting at CVG and looking around the table at community, like Rich Bainey and Brian Papke and Tom Banta sat right here, and the judge executives, and they all talked about collaboration. And I'll be honest with you, as an applicant, I was calling BS on that. And the entire time I was listening for the little digs, the little backhands, the because I knew what they were selling me, and I wasn't believing it.
Yeah.
And through the entire process, I never once got any information that told me that was the case. Never a dig, never the backhand, never the little jibe, never the sarcasm. And 5 years later, that holds true. And so you think about why, at least for my company, we're having the success that we're having today. It's because of the people that were here when we got here. It's the opportunity to pull those things together into something. And I think that's part of what makes Northern Kentucky special, at least for what we get to do.
I've always wondered, and I honestly have no idea what the answer is to this question, but why is the Cincinnati airport in Kentucky?
Well, the shortest possible answer to that question is you should not build an airport in a floodplain.
Oh, I love that.
Flooding keeps coming back up.
Wow,
And
if
so-
only we could communicate that. That's so interesting.
The slightly longer answer to that is when aviation scaled up in the last century, Cincinnati proper built an airport, Lunken, which turned out to be in a floodplain, which would also get socked in with fog. Aviation scales up as a result of World War II, and they realized it was really hard to land planes in a flood or fog, and Cincinnati needed a new place for that. And so the best, highest, flattest land they could find was in Boone County. Now, the fun question of that is the Cincinnati airport is in Kentucky. It's in Boone County, but it's managed by the Kenton County Authority and named after
that.
Covington, which is a Kenton County city.
That's a tongue twister, honestly.
And the reason it's named after Covington is that Covington was the closest, CVG was the closest, class 1 or tier 1 city to the location when it was created.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea that was the reason. And it's so logical now.
History,
I'm like, wow.
nerd alert.
Everyone is so sarcastically smug about that when they fly
When they land.
in and out of there. Why
am I in Kentucky?
Why am I in here? You know what I mean? This is so weird.
And it is confusing. I mean, to this day,
Yes.
people will be surprised that they are in Kentucky as though they have gotten on the wrong flight. So.
Right. They're panicked, huh? But really, no, there's nothing to panic about. It's amazing. So
We're teaching geography one airline
Yes.
passenger at a time.
Indeed.
Oh my goodness. Can you talk about the attractions that are kind of recent attractions? What brings people here? Do you think? I mean, I can tell you what brings me here, but I want to hear about what you guys have as what brings people here. And also, it seems like so many people are wanting to be here long term, in perpetuity. That's why I think you're doing so well, Nancy, at Horizon Funds, is because you just have people that have wanting to set up here long term and wanted their own community foundation.
Thank you. I'll let Lee answer this from his own perspective as well. As somebody who didn't grow up here, I also did not grow up here. I think I was grandfathered in because I married into a multi-gen Northern Kentucky family, the Grayson family. But people have, fond stories of my father-in-law and his dad as well. But for me, having grown up in Lexington, Kentucky, we always saw Cincinnati as being kind of this kind of large, kind of Northern Kentucky brought money to the state, but they were really part of Cincinnati. And then actually for a few years in the early teens, I lived in Boston. So we cheated on Northern Kentucky for a few years and lived up in Cambridge area around Harvard. And we had a global perspective, which showed that a lot of folks didn't really even know who Northern Kentucky was. And wait, it's next to Cincinnati? I'm so confused. So I'd have to go through a geography lesson and explain kind of the map and where we were and why did we call ourselves out differently than just saying we were part of Cincinnati. And then coming back home, things that I recognized that maybe I didn't have the perspective until I left and came back. Affordability, 100%. I think we have, despite the increased traffic, which I know we all like to complain about on the interstate, it is still easily navigable on a larger scale. We don't have the traffic that LA and Boston and other larger cities like New York might have. DC, of course, the gridlock, right? Chicago.
Don't miss it.
We don't, yeah. We have transportation issues. I don't want to minimize those, and that's something that always is coming to the forefront. But I do think the ability for folks to be able to be in an urban or quasi-urban environment, suburban, and then within a short drive, you can be in a more rural environment. You have access to just really great, vibrant green space where people can go hiking, even further down in the state. The Daniel Boone National Forest, the Gorge. There are a lot of opportunities. Yes, I think the proximity to 2/3 of the U.S., how close we are, the airport, I can't sing praises highly enough.
Yes.
Candace McGraw has single-handedly, I think, really put us on the map just by being innovative in her approach and how to really grow the airport in a meaningful way for industry. And I know Lee can weigh in on that too. We hit above our weight in arts in this region, and in Northern Kentucky, we have our own heritage and our own special arts institutions. So I just think having—
I actually did not know that, by the way.
Yes,
That's
yes,
really cool.
it is. And being able to celebrate that, and then, we all love sports, so pick a team. We have them in spades, and there may be a season or two that gets better or worse depending on who you're cheering for. But I think it's the vibrant culture that we have, the fact that we're really focused on being good neighbors and really looking out for one another, and then also just smart growth. And we have some leaders who are really taking time to make sure that as we grow, we're doing it in a way that I think makes sense for our kind of bootstrappy, like our commonwealth that we are.
The best type.
Yes.
Right, the best type. Lee, what's your take on that?
Nancy talked about a lot of great stuff. It's funny, as you were talking and thinking, the only thing worse than traffic in a community is a community that doesn't have traffic, because that means they're lacking a prosperity and a vibrancy. And nobody loves traffic, but boy, you definitely don't want to be in a place that doesn't have traffic either. So Nancy touched on a lot of great things about who we are today. I think part of our challenge, and you talked about it when you're in Boston, is how do we tell our story a little better? How do we have people know who we are and what we are and what's available here? And Aaron, go back to where you started this. We're sitting here in Ovation. We need to come up with like a kind of a cool term, because from just behind is where the new Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville, thank you, will go in, sitting in Ovation, 4th Street Bridge, redesign of 4th Street, the 1 NKY Center, Covington Central Riverfront, and the new Brent Spence Bridge. Is that $5 billion worth of investment that'll happen in the next couple of years in a 1.5-mile corridor? So we need is it the $5 million mile?
Yes.
We need to brand that, because there's really amazing things that are going to happen in this space in just the next couple of years. So coming from who we are today and what made us that to where we're going the next couple of years, there's just so much great stuff happening.
And I didn't realize this, but the reason why our development has looked different on the riverfront as compared to the Cincinnati side actually has to do with flooding and the topography of Northern Kentucky. And so if you were to look at Cincinnati from our side, let's say Madison Avenue, which shoots straight across and aligns with the city. I forget which street it is on the Cincinnati sign that it aligns with. That one right over there, wherever it is. Yeah, no, but you see the slope up. And so there is a higher bank of land that just naturally occurred on that side with, the ice age and everything pulling out and the river changing over time. Whereas we had a lower floodplain. And so until recently, I would say maybe from what I've heard, even like less than 100 years ago, when you started shoring up maybe with the Army Corps and some other different efforts trying to make sure that it was stabilized and that we didn't have quite as much flooding, although we still have some.
Yeah.
That development all the way down to really 6th or 7th Street and further south was kind of the leading edge of growth. So you just didn't see as much popping up there until they were able to stabilize that. And then there's been infill development and housing, but I hadn't thought of that before, which also means when we look at the Riverfront Commons, our walking trail, that will always look different than a Smale Park or whatever it might look like, because we still have some of those flooding issues on our side of the river. But taking advantage of what that might look like and recognizing that we have technology, we can be innovative in how we use some of that space, even though, again, it might be at risk to flooding.
Yeah, no, Nancy makes a great point. Where we sit, we look right across the street at Ovation, and you can see how they pedestaled the development up to get above the flood wall so that you can take advantage of those things. The Covington Central Riverfront will do the same thing. They will pedestal that development up so that when you're at what you think is land level, you're looking at Ovation here, you'll be 20 feet actually in the air. The Covington Central Riverfront will be similar. So
an incredible view too of downtown.
And it takes time and technology and learning construction methods and money to get to a point where we can develop that way on this side.
Exactly.
So can you guys tell me about, I think you both are impressive leaders, and I like how leadership is different for everybody. And my favorite question to ask CEOs is, how do you start your day? What do you do? What's your routine in the morning? Nancy, I'm gonna pick on you. I'm gonna start with you first. What is your morning routine?
I will confess, I'm not a morning person. I'm a night owl. I'm just gonna call it what it is. Everyone who knows me, if I tried to give you some elaborate morning effort, it's not happening. I work out at night, not in the morning. Actually, I just got a Peloton, so I decided to bite the bullet, and I'm going to be doing that more. But in the mornings, I typically consume a lot of news. I'll be quite frank. I have a lot of aggregator emails, and then look at some of the other online journals that we're reading. My husband is the same. We consume a lot of our content early in the day. Coffee is very important for me. Again, I got into meditation during the pandemic. I will say that as the years have sped up again, we've gotten to that hurried state where I'm not doing it as much, especially again in the morning. See prior comment about not being a morning person. But for me, I want to make sure that I'm prepared for the day so that when it's time to get to work, I can hit the ground running. And I've read everything that I need to happen in the last, 12 hours, the news that has broken.
Right.
Yes. So content, get that caffeine.
So what time do you go to bed then? That would be my question for you.
Well, it's pretty late. I'm usually asleep by 12:30 or 1.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so you wake up when?
Typically 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're amazing. Okay. My mom is on the same clock as you, so I'm like, oh my gosh.
I'm so tired of hearing that.
What is your morning like? How do you start your morning?
Yeah, so I've had plenty of time to think about it there. So I get up, first thing I do is I make up the bed. Okay. Get out of bed, make up the bed.
Yeah.
Probably second thing is take the dog outside. We're training a puppy, so she needs to get outside pretty
God
quickly.
bless
And it's similar. I getting older, so I drink a protein shake.
Yes.
About third thing every morning.
Oh my gosh. Does that mean I'm getting older because I drink a protein shake every morning and my routine so far is spot on your routine, but keep going.
It beats the alternative.
Oh my gosh.
And then very similar. I've actually, since the pandemic has waned or gone away, I've moved away from reading news first thing in the morning because I felt like I was getting sucked into that. I'll go to the gym, I'll work out, and then I do a little meditating, set my attention for the day, and then try to get out the door.
I mean, I love that you guys both, I'm like, I should meditate. That's what I do. I should. It would be great, but never have I gotten to the state. So I'm glad you guys are obviously calming. I feel the calming presence today.
The hardest.
Yeah.
There are apps for that,
I
right?
should do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
5-10 minutes a day.
Yes.
It changes your brain, actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's. I mean, I've read it all. I just haven't acted on it.
Sometimes I think a lot about meditating, but I
meditate on meditating.
there's kind of like a
Yes.
so yeah.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to do one other fun question before we go back to some business questions. But something I also ask a lot of CEOs that we have on and talk to in the region are, what is in your bug out bag? And for you, in case you're unaware, bug out bag is like worst case scenario, the world is ending. it's not about your kids or your family or anything like that. This is like, what are you putting in your backpack, your bug out bag? Like, you've got to grab a bag and go.
Yeah, and that, my question is, why am I bugging out? That's what I need more
Nancy,
information.
No. Big picture.
I'm hoping my husband is coming with me and is carrying his own bug out bag.
Yes.
So we'll just say that first, Trey. You're with me, right? And of course, my dog Oliver, who is a little wiener dog. He's a miniature dachshund, so he's coming
He goes
too.
in the bag.
He could fit in the bag. We're not tiny people.
Yeah.
My husband's 6'5" and I'm 5'10", and he's just this tiny little wisp of a thing. So, husband and dog aside, and presuming my children will be okay. They're grown, by the way. They don't live with us anymore. But I love oysters, and an oyster knife is like an all-encompassing tool that you can use for so many different things. So just in case I have to shuck an oyster or use that knife for other means,
Purposes.
I'm pretty handy in the
Doom and
kitchen.
gloom.
I did mention I was a foodie earlier. I think I might pick a book or two depending on something that I can grab. I love to read. I would presume if it's end times, we're not worried about technology. So I'm not going to think about the phone. That might be kind of nice to unplug like we did several years ago a little bit more. Maybe if I'm trying to think through something of comfort that might be valuable. I mean, I have some kind of like touch things that I have in my nightstand drawer. Those like catch-all drawers that,
Yes,
my kids
100%.
had them. It always had like McDonald's toy junk that was floating around in there. Mine has some like photos and some spiritual things. So this little wooden cross that a small group gave to me at one point. So I think just kind of those touch points, and then the oyster knife and the dog and my husband.
I think that's a great bug out bag. I like it. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, if we're really bugging out, it's a reframing of priorities. So
It is.
I'm going to put some cigars in there,
Yes.
some chocolate, some coffee.
May as well live your life.
A lot. No protein is going in that bag at all. We have no room for that. First aid kit is probably a good idea at some point.
Yeah.
My Taylor Swift collection of CDs.
I like that. I
Something to play
As
them
long
on.
as they're Taylor's
Yeah.
version.
Something to
Taylor's
play them
version.
on. Probably necessity. Bourbon. Definitely throw some bourbon in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are great answers.
What's
and
the
now
best
I know,
answer to that question you've heard? What's the worst answer without saying a name? And what's the best answer?
Although then if you say it, the person who's
They
listening,
know.
they're
They
going to
know. Then
Oh.
they know. I don't want to.
All right, well, what's the best one?
I'll say my answer was the worst answer. How about that? Can I say that? And I actually think it was pretty bad. Matt, our producer, is shaking his head and agreeing with me.
Oh, no.
So I think because no one's just ever asked me that question, so I was just like a bottle of wine, and I don't even remember what I said. It wasn't great. So best answer. What was it? A bow and arrow? I don't know. Frank Dupps. I'm going to call him out. I think he was like. I liked his answers the best. It was a little bit of both, I would say, and I trusted that he could lead a village. So I think that was my favorite one.
I mean,
so far.
I'm a lover of Survivor. It's like my guilty
Yes.
television, mainly because of like the psychology and how the game has changed over time. I'm kind of a competitive person, in case you didn't know. But it's like, okay, maybe we need fire. Like we need to be able to build fire, and we need like comfort. Now this is going
Now
to be
you've rethought it.
a date night conversation
This
with
will be-
Trey
this
at
will
some
be your
point.
I brought a
next
bottle
date
of
night.
wine, but no corkscrew.
Yes, I think you just figure we've got Nancy's oyster knife.
My oyster knife could actually
we'll be
make it
fine.
work.
I have a bow and arrow. That's a great
Yeah.
answer too.
I thought that was a good answer.
Could be like Daryl from The Walking Dead.
Exactly.
Or The Last of Us. Like, I
Yeah.
think I'm getting traumatized by this
I love it. I
conversation.
know. I'm sorry about that.
I feel like I'm going out in the first wave.
So we'll be positive. But by the way, these were like #1 in sales there for a while. They were peaks like on Amazon. Bug out bags. You could buy bug out bags.
You could buy a bug out bag.
Yeah. So if you are an end of worlder person, then they're available on Amazon. You can have fun with it for Christmas or whenever. But
I hope you get royalties for that promotion there.
I don't. I should. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit more about all the positive things that are happening. So what is coming down, I would say, the pipe for Northern Kentucky on economic development? Are there any projects or anything that you guys want to highlight? Because I'm looking around, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a crane there. I've seen other cranes. Like, this is good. This is really good.
I'll weigh in from just my philanthropic partner side. We have a handful of funds that I like to say but for us, I don't know if the community would be quite as aware the activity or being maybe invited to be involved in kind of that effort, whatever it might be. One of those, and it's actually an indirect partnership with BNKY, but is through Blue North, which used to be UpTech, and they are an entrepreneurship accelerator of sorts. But Dave Knox, who was hired, stroke of genius. I think everything he touches is gold. He's wonderful. Has formed a fund with us called the Northern Kentucky Entrepreneur Fund, and really thinking in different ways about how to support local business and not just thinking about tech startups, because our community has so many of those small mom and pop businesses that we talked about, but partnering with AVHRA, partnering with Rachel DeRocher and the Grateful Grams and the Kitchen Incubator Collective. And so what is it that we can be doing to provide support? And if that's philanthropic support, if it is investment support, capital for whatever investments they might be making. So thinking outside of the box, and I love it because there are startups that potentially could be giving back to that entrepreneur fund to pay it forward for others who are going through a similar experience down the road. So that's one that I get excited about because I think it's
that sounds like a great fund,
right? Sort like right sizing in my mind. Thank
Yes.
you. I think so too. But right sizing how we're approaching startups, and it can't just be this monolithic tech kind of what we think of with Silicon Valley and all the unicorn businesses. I hope we have some unicorns coming out of Northern Kentucky.
Yes.
And
Well,
I know
you
Lee
and
will
I
be
are-
attracting
you and I
that
are
too.
here,
Yes,
so,
right. We're the unicorns. But allowing those companies to thrive, and if they fail, then to be able to get up and have a strong enough safety net that they can give it a shot for another effort that they're looking at. So that to me is something in the entrepreneurship space that I get excited about, thinking about how we're kind of playing in the sandbox a little bit.
I'm into the entrepreneurship, especially when you talk about the bootstraps of Northern Kentucky, of Kentucky in general. And I'm just excited for you. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Lee, what other things?
I'll build directly off what Nancy said, going from entrepreneurship to scaling. And again, tying into our conversation of people in the community doing the right things and how that all leverages off of each other. And I touched on this earlier. So we are building, as part of the One NKY Center, one entire floor of that building, about 15,000 square feet, will be what's called a life science wet lab. It's an incubation space for young startup life science companies. So you think about, we have Gravity here, we have Bexion here. They're here because they needed a place to get started and grow, a way to go from 1 or 2 or 3 employees to scale. This life science laboratory that we're going to have is going to be exactly that. What's really cool is it allows us to then pair that with grants and programming that the Commonwealth provides for startups. And so the idea that we could see a future Ethos laboratory, a future Gravity, a future Bexion, a future, and then they have the infrastructure of like a CTI to work with, I think is really incredible and exciting, and kind of moving from what the community has done in the environment that we've built, from entrepreneurship into kind of the more traditional economic development, to me is super exciting.
Honestly, I can't wait to see what's next, what's coming from Northern Kentucky. You guys have been seriously an amazing treat to have on the What Gives podcast. We should continue this conversation, don't you think? Somewhere else, grab a cocktail.
Yes,
there's
downtown
a few good bars
in
and breweries
Covington.
that we could walk to
Yes,
from here.
I think we should do that. Walk from here. So, thanks for tuning in. Thank you both
Thank you
for being a
having
part
us.
of this podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Future starts right now.
To learn more about how to expand your philanthropy, please reach out to the Northern Cincinnati Foundation.